Hey, welcome to my series. Last episode we left it on constructor methods and parameters. To remind you guys, constructor methods are used to initialize variables. Next up are conditionals. Conditionals are used to make sure a block of code runs if a certain condition is met. For example, the if-then statement. In the if-then statement, if the condition stated in it is true or happens, the block of code will run. For example, if true, it will print out the condition is met or something like that. Or vice versa, if the condition is false and it is false, it will print out the condition has not been met. The condition also doesn't have to be only true or false. For example, it can be stated that the condition to run is if the number of students is equals to 30. But the basic premise is still the same. If the condition is true, it will run. If it is false, it will not run. To show this better, there's another type of conditional statement, which is if then else. It is similar to the last one, but in this one, we set an else, which functions as if the condition is not true or not met, it will run the else. Next up is if then else if, which is the same as last one, if then else, but in this one you can chain the else's as much as you want. Here is an example. You can also use nested conditional statements, which are conditional statements inside other conditional statements. Once again, here's an example from Codecademy. Lastly are switch statements. In switch statements, you make several cases which it will run through from top to bottom. Once again, Codecademy showed a really helpful example of this, which helped me understand it a lot more. Further on, there are conditional operators, of which there are three: and, or, and not. The symbols for these are: for and, it is a double ampersand. For or, it is a double vertical bar. And for not, it is a single exclamation mark. And works as if both conditions are true, then the variable will run as true. Or works as for if either or both conditions are true, then it will run as true. As for not, it will run if the opposite of the condition is true. You can also combine conditional operators together, and how you do so is you do it following a certain order, which is parentheses first, then not, then and, then or. Next up are arrays. Arrays are used to store and group a large number of values together. Without it, you'd need to put in a large amount of repetitive code, and with no way to group them up with. Arrays can hold any type of primitive data types, such as ints, doubles, booleans, etc., of which we learned of in the last episode. Here's an example from Codecademy. As you can see, to index the values, you start from 0, not from 1. So, if there are 5 numbers, and you want to access the 5th one, you need to search using the 4th index. But first up, you need to initialize an array to actually store data inside the array. Which is why you need to add the data to the array to actually use it in anything. Here I will show you how to make arrays and how to initialize them. You can use array.toString to find out the contents of the array you've made. Also, to access the indices of the array, you just need the name of the array and the index of the value. For example, if you want to get the 4th number of the array shown here, you will do system.out.println prices 3. Remember, the indices start at 0, not 1. You can also find the length of your array with system.out.println prices.length. It will show 4, as it counts the number of values in the array, not the index. So what happens if you want to add a new value to your array? For example, to make the array from one containing 4 values to 5 values. Unfortunately, using arrays, you are not able to do this. Array lists are similar to arrays, but in it you can add and remove values as you wish. Here is an example of how you make an array list. As you can see from the picture, in array list you don't use brackets, instead you use angle brackets. Also, a difference from arrays with array lists are array lists cannot use ints, doubles, and chars. For array lists you use integer, double with a capital letter in the front, and char with a capital letter in the front. To add values to your array list, you use array name dot add parentheses the value. Also, if you want to specify which index you want your value to be in, you can use array name dot add parentheses index comma value. Next thing I learned are loops. There are two types of loops: for loops and while loops. For loops repeat the code until the condition specified in the format is achieved. While loops repeat until a condition is met. It is more loosely made, but it is also more tricky, as you need to remember to add a condition to stop the loop, as if you don't, it will repeat forever and it will crash your software. For loops don't need this, as the condition to stop the loop is already inside the format of the for. Next up is accessing in Java. There are three main types for access in Java, which are public, private, and protected. In public, every class can access the contents such as the methods and the fields in the class. They can access and use the methods as they please. While in private, the only thing that can access that method or field is the ones in that class itself. As for protected, it can be used and seen by only its own class and its subclass, not by other classes. If you want a variable that's private, but you don't want the other classes to know the name or have a different name for the variable, but you want them to be able to access it, there's a solution to that, which are accessor methods, which are also known as getter methods. You make the accessor method public, and you make the accessor method return or have a similar disposition to the original private variable. You use it so that other classes can use the same functionality without them needing to make their own variable. Mutator methods, on the other hand, also known as setter methods, are used to reset or set the value of a existing variable. Next up are more about classes, more specifically inheritance. Here I learned that classes can inherit fields or methods from another class, and each class has to have their own file, but only one class needs a main method. Child classes inherit the parents constructor. Parents are the original class, but you can modify it using super parentheses, or you can use add override to override it completely. You can also use objects from different classes but share the same parent and add them to a single array or array list. I also learned about debugging, which is used to find and identify the problems in my code. And then I also learned about 2D arrays, or two-dimensional arrays, which, as name implies, are two-dimensional. Two-dimensional arrays are arrays which have multiple arrays inside them. This concludes my learning progress of the basics of coding, of which I've learned. I've learned about a few others, but I couldn't add it to this video, and wasn't important enough to add to the video. Next videos will be about explaining about my apps, so that you guys understand what each thing does. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode.